Well, hello and welcome. I am so thrilled to be here tonight with Tanya Aguiniga. I'm thrilled that we have this opportunity to speak and to share more about your part in the Art 21 documentary, your work at the Taubman Museum of Art in the exhibition A Very Anxious Feeling, Voices of Unrest in the American Experience, 20 Years, the Beth Rudin DeWoody Collection. And we've already got some great questions, so I'm looking forward to hearing you answer those. I've been looking forward to this all week, so I'm glad that it's finally happened. I've never been so excited for a Friday night, especially right now. Since people are just coming in, I'll give you a bio of our featured guest this evening, and then we'll jump into Tanya's extended section of the Art 21 film. Okay, so without further ado, the binational artist Tanya Aguiniga pushes the power of art to transform the United States-Mexico border from a site of trauma to a creative space for personal healing and collective expression. Reflecting the cultural hybridity and community of the U.S. Mexico borderlands, the artist discusses her upbringing in Tijuana, her training as a furniture and craft designer, and her artistic beginnings with the border art workshop Taller de Arte Fronticero collective. From her studio, the artist and her team produce objects like jewelry and housewares to fund their social justice-based projects, workshops, and performances. And I'm going to post in the chat where you can find more out about Ambos and more out about her studio and where you can find these great jewelry and crafts. Aguiniga returns to the site of one of these projects titled Border Quipu, where she and her team recorded the stories of daily commuters from Tijuana to San Diego. This segment also follows Aguiniga as she prepares for metabolizing the border, a performance and personal reckoning with the pain caused by the border wall. The work is a demanding physical feat. The artist walks along the border wall in a glass suit that is designed to break, in order to express the effects of the wall as wounds on her body and to symbolize the struggle of the migrant experience. Aguiniga demonstrates how art can be both personal, physical, and emotional outlet, and a vehicle to help others empathize and think about how we're all connected to each other. So without further ado, we'll jump into the video, and we look forward to seeing you in a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so then the space is kind of broken up into different projects that I have going on. So right now I'm starting to get ready to make a bunch of accessories again. And then I have this really incredible project that I'm doing for a show at Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions. So I am hand stamping. Let me see if I can hold the computer. I'm hand stamping a bunch of these like survival kits for crossing the border in your car. So I'm making the labels, and then I'm putting different things inside of them into these little like plastic packs, so it kind of looks like a big candy thing. But the packs have a portable miniature toilet for people, because sometimes when you're crossing the border, it takes up to 8 hours to cross. And this is all based on, a few months ago, an 86-year-old woman died while waiting to cross in her car. So there's like little saladitos, which is a Mexican candy that is pure salt. So it is for like rehydration. They also get granola bars. Downstairs, I have 500 bottles of water. And so then that's one project. But then the other one is I'm making a bunch of really large scale versions of these incense burners that will be attached to the border fence all along the U.S. Mexico border to give people a way to mourn or to ask for safe passage. So they're kind of acknowledging different ways of crossing the border and helping take care of living bodies, but also those that are in transition trying to come to the US and those that have perished. This weekend, I'm teaching a teen activist workshop. So it's going to be a poster making workshop. So I have just different things that I'm going to be showing the students for how to make their own really inexpensive stencils. I can take you downstairs. So the studio, you can kind of see, it used to be this really big open space. And now, after COVID, I had to give back half of the space because I could no longer afford it. But the outdoor space has all this water bottles, really random ass things that I do with the kids, random ass dyeing station. Let's see. I think behind me, you can kind of see a little bit of, there's a really pretty mountain behind me. The studio's in a big Quonset hut. So it's this really huge round building that used to be military housing during World War II. And then the downstairs is now one big open space that, again, the studio used to occupy when there was a lot of us working here. And then I'm really lucky that on the other side is the LA River. I'm gonna open this gate to try to take you out there. Can you guys still see okay?
Yeah, this looks great.
Okay.
So while you're opening that, how can people support your activist work along the border and the works that you're doing there?
So the Ambos Project website is still going because we're still working on different projects on the border to help migrants, and then people could always donate stuff through the Ambos Project page. People can also support the studio by just buying any accessories or anything that are for sale on the site. But yeah, so this is the LA River. So the studio is right beautifully in front of the LA River, and there's a little bit of water and stuff down there that you can see. And I'll take you guys upstairs again. But the space is it's really beautiful. I rent from a tow yard. So on the other side of the gate is actually a tow yard. But yeah, it's kind of a pretty time of day.
It is. It's a beautiful time of day. And it's a really beautiful space. I mean, I think you've transformed it in such an exciting way that you can really see all the different projects you have going all at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. I'm glad that I was able to keep half of it because in the beginning of the pandemic, I lost the majority of jobs. And then sadly, I had to let go of everybody that was working here because we no longer had paying projects. So yeah, so it's been a pretty insane year for all of us. And so, yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, that is insane. But the work you're doing is really important. And I think it was also, looking at the video, this is early 2020 when all of this was happening, right?
Yeah. So Metabolizing the Border was in, I think it was February, like the first or second week of February. And then that show that they showed, my solo show that had that work, and then a bunch of the performance pieces from the border, that opened in March. And so, yeah, so it was only open to the public for a couple of weeks before it shut down, sadly.
That is really sad.
Yeah.
But it lives on in perpetuity in this video too. I mean, in a way that, it wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. But I have some questions for you, and we did get some questions in last night. And again, I'll just open it up that if anybody has questions, please throw them in the Q&A as well. But yeah, I was really interested. You were asking people as they were crossing and filling out their border quipu and making their knots. Why, like what that experience, what does it mean for them to cross the border? What are your thoughts when you cross the border? And I was really curious now that, you don't cross the border every day. And you're so involved with it. What does the border mean to you? And have your thoughts changed from when you used to cross the border to when you cross it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my thoughts have largely changed because of the Border People project. Because before I mainly thought about, my personal experience of crossing the border every day, which was from the age of 4 to 18. So a lot of it was like through the eyes of a child, being really afraid and having this really like huge experience of seeing like thousands of migrants lined up like right next to the fence, and me being able to just say U.S. citizen and go back and forth. So a lot of it was really heavy because of that. And like, I didn't really know how to deal with that privilege. I didn't really know, why there was so much racism and so much separation between the two sides. Mm-hmm. When, so much of my community was going back and forth, because we, were of Mexican heritage, but a lot of us, grew up with only like American channels on TV, only like US radio would come on. So it's all this stuff that's just a very like different experience along the borderlands. But like I said, when I started the project, I thought only of my own experiences and not of those of us that are US citizens and can go back and forth. But I wasn't really taking into consideration in that beginning part the experiences of everybody who cannot cross, and the experiences of all of the people that have been deported, the experience of all the asylum seekers that started to, to live along the border and were waiting for, for asylum cases in the US. I also didn't think that much about how U.S. Mexico border policy really like reverberates through like all of Central America, and then even as far as like Haiti, Cameroon, Cuba, like all of these different experiences of people, and what makes people come to the border to try to make it to the US. And so now, I think my eyes are just a lot more open to the vastness of people that are affected. And again, also thinking of like their journeys. A lot of people that that live in Tijuana and in like border communities now, a lot of people were from Haiti, and it took them 5 years to get to the border. So it was people going through Central America, going through South America, up Central America, and all the different places that I really think about, failed to help them or took advantage of people. So it opened my eyes to a lot more stuff.
Yeah,
that.
Because I had some questions. I had a personal question. We also got a question yesterday about the experience of you're wearing the suit, and I think you talk about it as being personal, but it also feels very collective. There was a question that we got that I will pull up, because I thought it was a really interesting question. The work with the glass pieces and huaraches reminds me of peregrinaje, which means basically pilgrimage. With getting up early, walking along the border, then the huaraches breaking, you leave walking on your feet. What was that part of your intention to have the work simulate a spiritual journey? And my additional question onto that was it cathartic? I mean, I think that you talk early on about how this was about mending a wound, and I was really curious if it was that for you, or if it was something completely different.
It was a lot different than I thought it was going to be, mainly because there was a film crew following me and like with a mic like shoved up my face, like kind of recording, all the messiness of the experience. So it was a little intrusive, which kind of kept me from like really like deep diving into like the full experience. But it was super, super cathartic. And, I think with a lot of these like performance pieces, a lot of it is like me allowing myself to learn from my body and entering into this really like strenuous meditative state that comes from a lot of like physical pain. And kind of letting some of that physicality take on like some of the, I guess, the relieving part of like working through things. And so it was actually super meditative, super painful, but also, so I did it for 2 hours. And the suit is close to 70 pounds. And because the shoes broke and they were meant to break, and I was walking on gravel. So it was like a pretty painful, kind of very like Catholic, weird, like self-flogging experience. But at the same time, I got to the point where I was just like, okay, like how much longer do I have to keep enduring this? Like how much longer do I have to carry all of this pain? And kind of was able to transfer a lot of that like trauma that I had been carrying with me since I was a child, but then also new trauma that I built up through the 3 years of traveling the border, and engaging with other borderland communities and seeing, just so much like pain and so much like levels of abuse from the Mexican, but also the U.S. government. Yeah, so it allowed me to kind of release a lot of that and to get to the point where I was just like, okay, like I don't, like there's some parts that are okay to let go of, like they're not mine anymore,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I loved how, you kept the what was left over as something that was, it almost felt religious in how you presented them in your exhibition, right? Like you had the light coming through the globe that you were carrying, and there is something that I think watching it is also really spiritual. Obviously it's extremely personal, and it was in that extended one we just watched also had a clip about the felt me, which is in some ways also very collective, and also very personal in the experience you have. And that felt, for lack of a that felt really like also very like lighthearted and fun, but I also think probably it was probably felt different for you too. So I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything about that, or like the differences between those two performances.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. The Felt Me was the first like performance that I did that was just me alone, doing something that like exploring a personal idea. And so with that one was 5 hours. And so with like all of these, like it's kind of like a strange, like durational like experience. And so that one, I like really wanted to invite a lot of like close friends, a lot like my family, but also like gallerists and collectors and old students of mine, to participate, just to kind of see, what is it like to be an object and to be like fully objectified, but also like, can I let people take care of me, and can I let people get that close to my skin, and will people get that close to my skin, and like what is that exchange like? But a lot of it was kind of letting go of like me being in control of something, and just kind of letting things go where they go, to see, because in the end that ended up being like a perfect like replica of my body at that time, the way it like came out at the end. And so it was also like, am I okay with like this coming out like really shitty? Like, am I okay with, with people kind of like learning through their hands, without me guiding them through stuff? And so with metabolizing the border, I think that there is some component of that, where originally I wanted to be alone and I wanted to just be naked, like wearing all the glass and just like go for it. But everyone in the studio was like, no, like we can't let you get all cut up, and like you're a mother now, like we can't, like you're gonna have to hire an EMT, like we have to take precautions. And so some of that was also, like learning, okay, like when is too much, like when am I just like being a martyr, and when am I like stepping into my power,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I don't know how you feel about it, but from the viewer looking on, it really did feel like you were able to address I mean, when you were showing us pictures of, or showing us, you know, the glass, I mean, I literally gasped when I first saw it. I was like, oh my God, she's going to tear up her feet. This is going to be so scary. So when you put on the boots, I had like a huge sigh of relief. I was like, thank God she's not going to hurt herself in this process. So I think yeah, it is an interesting and amazing balance, but that also speaks to your interest in collaboration and your interest in listening to other people and, you know, taking what they say and incorporating that in a way that feels like it's yours. So that was really neat.
Yeah. And I think like with that too, like, I feel like, you know, like there's so much, like the immigrant experience is something that touches so many people's lives. And like, whether like your family just came here, whether your family has been here for a really long time, and even like within like Native American families, like, you know, there's still like some like problem, like migration, just because of like us sadly living in like a capitalist society where we have to kind of move around with jobs. And so like part of letting people in and letting people be part of these projects is also, you know, not just acknowledging like their own like migration journey or their own like exploration into their identities, but also like paying like homage, you know, to all of the struggle that so many of our families have, you know, been sadly like exposed to, you know.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to take this opportunity, since you mentioned kind of moving from the land, to ask you about the work of art that's currently on view at the Taubman Museum. It's called Gynic Dispossession. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, sorry, Katrina, it says host is disabled screen sharing. So if you could enable it, that would be awesome. But just a little bit about the show while we get that sorted out. The Very Anxious Feeling, Voices of Unrest in the American Experience, 20 Years, the Beth Rudin DeWoody Collection, is an exhibition that shines light on the widespread feelings of apprehension in this selection of contemporary artworks. The works in this exhibition reference both collective and personal anxieties and highlight the intersectional voices and experiences of Latinx and Latin American artists living or working in the United States. At the present moment of cultural reckoning, a rise in populism, a failing economy, and a global health crisis, citizens are challenging institutions and systems that were built on and continue to reinforce inequity. A Very Anxious Feeling presents multiple visions, making evident the descent, hope, joy, and transcendence of those who have witnessed America's past, who inform America's present, and who demand more of its future. So that's just a little bit about the show. I'll show you a couple of pictures. This is what I'm going to share and view. Start. All right. So this is the whole exhibition when you walk in, and then this is the wall where your work is focused. And when we were thinking about this wall, we were thinking about vulnerability in particular, and I was wondering if you can talk. This work is called, for those of you who are just tuning in, Gynic Dispossession 2. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this work in relationship to your work, thinking about, I mean, it feels very violent at the same time. I mean, Gynic Dispossession, it kind of signals that. So yeah, I'd just love to hear what you.
Yeah, so this work was part of a series that I did for an exhibition called Three Women. And the really weird thing about that show, so it was an exhibition that had three of us women in the show. And so one person was Lenore Tani, who, you know, passed away, but was a really amazing weaver. And then the other person was Loie Howell, and she is a young painter in Brooklyn. And then I was the third woman in the show. And the curator for the exhibition had asked that we watch the Robert Altman film Three Women, and that movie helped inform like some of the works that we were making. I had never seen the movie, and so I found it super difficult to like really like try to understand like why they had tasked us with this, you know, with this assignment of watching this film. And so the film is about it's about three women in like the desert, like somewhere in like by Palm Springs. And like one of them is kind of slowly losing her mind. They're all kind of like sleeping with the same man. And so it just like layered all of these complexities of like, oh, you know, like, am I like who in this show is like the different representations of these women? Like one of them is really crazy, one of them is really old, like all of this like weird stuff that I started to take on and kind of question, you know, like what are, like how do men view women in society, and like when do we occupy these different like spaces like throughout our lives, and how is it that men, especially like cis white male curators, like how is it that they can feel that they can just put these different like archetypes on us, or expect us to work through and make like produce work in response to this without them offering any type of engagement or discourse about like why it was that this happened. And so what was really weird is I asked the curator, you know, why was it that you gave this assignment for us to make work for this show? And I, you know, watching the show had so many conflicting emotions about it that I brought in like different generations of women to watch it with me, to have discussions about how we felt about it, how we felt about, you know, somebody, and the film itself also was based on like a dream that Robert Altman had, but then there was no script. So then the women were asked to like come up with a dialogue and ad lib a lot of stuff. So I was just like, there's just all these layers of men kind of forcing us to do all this labor for them, or to be vulnerable, or to like expose ourselves constantly. So anyway, so I asked the curator why he had chosen this film as a premise for the show, and he said, "Oh, it's only because it looked good on the invite. The like image from the movie poster just looked really good." And so I was just like, "What the fuck?" So I just got down this like whole other like rabbit hole of rage. And so then it just, you know, was all these like different layers of, you know, experiences with people where I had just gone to visit my mother-in-law, who like wouldn't wear a bathing suit. So I bought her a bathing suit so she could like use her hot tub, which she's had for years, because she was in a lot of pain. And anyways, and so I was thinking about, you know, like the female body aging, and how then somewhere in there we suddenly like lose a lot of our like sexiness, or, you know, just slipping into all these different ideas of us living in like a feminine form, and what does it mean at different times of our body, of our lives, and friends with you know, hysterectomies, all of these different things that, you know, that we have to think about living and existing in our femme bodies. And other conversations with friends, with Indigenous friends that were undocumented, and them talking about their own sense of like losing power within their bodies when in the United States, how they're like just steps removed from power because of their indigeneity, because of, you know, the color of their skin, because of their undocumented status, because all these different layers, no? Of things that the US like structurally kind of sets up against us. And so all of the pieces in the show are all of these like really rigid, they start out with rigid shapes. So all of the rope is actually like really geometric forms that for me represented institutions. And they all have these really weak structures that hold up whatever's in them. So they have, you can kind of see a little bit of the net underneath the little ball. And so it was pieces about institutional racism. And then all of the forms within them represent a lot of people that I felt were being barely supported by the US like institutional systems. And so then these round forms for me represent a combination of womb, breast, and vagina. And because they're hollow and rendered powerless, it's about, reproductive rights. It's about men objectifying our bodies, but also using our bodies. It's about, government doing a lot of, like forced hysterectomies, birth control, all kinds of stuff that, removes us from our power. And the little hair pieces that are on there, were all of the different balls have different pubic shaving patterns that you can ask for when you get shaved at like a Brazilian like waxing salon. So it's like just like layers of just really strange like objectification. And yeah,
I loved this work before, and now I'm like obsessed. This is amazing. Thank you so much. No, there's so many layers. I mean, I know that it was like you were probably incredibly angry with the curator, but I mean, this work was really amazing, and I mean, the work you created for it, I think is the whole exhibition was fantastic. So, I mean, maybe from that place of rage, it was actually really productive.
Oh, no, totally. I mean, I was, really proud of all the work that was made, and all of us in the studio, that we're working together on the show. We're just crying for, thinking of like our moms and all of these different things, where we were, really like while we stitch and while we work on stuff, like we think about all of the people whose, voices we would like to include in the work. So it was also, very cathartic and a really beautiful exhibition in the end. But it was, sometimes you have to work with really difficult people in the art world.
That's true. That's true. When you find the good ones, you hold on to them pretty tightly because they're pretty great. All right, we have more questions. But I want to get to other people's questions. There was a question about if you view art and craft as one and the same or two separate processes. And and there was also a question about if there are works that you've made that you're happier with the process of making them than the actual finished result.
Okay. So I totally view art and craft as the same thing. And I think that, like, sadly in the US, it's like taken a really long time for people to kind of accept like craft as an art form. But in other places, all over the world, craft is art. And I think especially in indigenous communities in the US, there's a really different understanding of like craft and craft as art. So I think a lot of the like separations and like hierarchies within like art versus craft in the US like have to do with a lot of, like patriarchal, patronizing hetero, it's just it's a pretty racist like, system designed to keep white dudes in power. So
yeah, absolutely. This hierarchy within creation as well. So then within these works where you're I mean, I guess I was thinking when I saw that question about process, I also was thinking about performances. Performances are all about the process, right, of getting to that point, and like what's left over are oftentimes these remnants. So I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of your work is focused on process more so than final, but then a lot of your work is focused on final. So I'm curious about how you think about process and versus getting to a specific final product.
Most of the stuff is like pretty intuitive. So even like with the pieces that are more like formal, like works that like can be sold, the process is like a super like experimental like way of working and way of making it open, like making everything kind of open-ended so that more people can participate in it, or so that, there's no like me dictating what something should be or shouldn't be. And a lot of that is just because I really love learning and I really love challenging myself to take on like working with new materials, kind of messing up the process so that I like don't get too attached to anything. Because I think with a lot of the stuff, you know, a lot of, I guess the issues that I have with like the fine art world is the like exotification of things, or the like overly like preciousness of things. And I really love, you know, mainly because I like came up from like a super working class family that doesn't like nobody in my family were artists, and maybe they would have been had that, you know, been a choice for them in their lives. But I just really love being able to find random like everyday things and having them be a like really level starting point for talking about, you know, like what art is, what art can be, and really like transforming things like through your intuition and like with your like ancestral knowledge of stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. We got a question that says, your work is centered on connection. How has the intense isolation of the pandemic affected your practice, and what ideas has it sparked?
It's been like, it's now been, I think, only maybe 2 months or a little over 2 months that I've been back in the studio. The rest of the time, sadly, I, you know, was just like home taking care of my 7-year-old, and scrambling to try to figure out, you know, like what pandemic relief is there that I could apply for? How can I like get some money together to be able to, you know, like send thousands of masks to the border, to asylum seekers, to different like Native communities all over the US. And so kind of a lot of it was operating in like a real like state of emergency, you know, to try to figure out like how can I survive and how can I make sure that all the communities that I care for and all of like my family survives. And now that luckily like I've been able to like cobble together some sort of like getting the studio back going. It's pretty sad, you know. It's like I'm used to working with a lot of people. I'm used to like I haven't worked alone, I think, in like 12 years. So it's a really different place, and like really like I, you know, the first piece that I made that brought me back into the studio, which was a paid commission, I made it too big for me to handle by myself. And then I was like, oh shit, yeah, I forgot you actually like need, yeah. So I was like, oh no, like I need somebody to help me like flip it so I could finish it. And now I have to figure out, you know, who's gonna take care of my daughter so that maybe like my husband can come and help me flip it. Like who can I quarantine with? So it's been a really like a challenging process of trying to figure out like how much I can do, how much I can't do, how much can I still engage with communities when, you know, I have to wear like a N95 mask and we have to stay far away from each other.
Right.
Yeah, so it's been pretty complicated to try to figure out like how to keep going. But a lot of it, thankfully, has been helped by like Zoom, figuring out Zoom and figuring out that, okay, like we can actually like have meetings and you can actually take advantage of this weird ass like digital realm, because now I can do like 3 lectures all over the country in 1 week and I can still like be home at night, you know. So it's been a strange adjustment. I don't really know, like, you know, how things will change because so much sadly is up in the air just because of lack of funds, you know. And like I'm not somebody that like came from money. I don't have savings. So then it's just kind of figuring things out like literally week by week. And also, you know, figuring out how can you do all of this stuff while having to like homeschool a kid who's going crazy, and how do you make sure that everybody's like mental health is taken care of, and that yeah, which is just as important as, you know, like our physical selves. So it's been kind of crazy.
Yeah, Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I think that that's something that a lot of people can relate to right now is that, you know, we always wear a lot of hats and now we have to wear them all at the same time, 24
Yeah,
hours a day. So,
totally. Yeah, so it's like just juggling a lot of different stuff. And then I'm on the board of the Craft Emergency Relief Fund. So then at one point, so I've been on the board for 4 years, and at one point I got them to accept applications in Spanish because we had done a lot of work after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. But then we didn't have other board members that could read Spanish. So then I kind of, and then now we have one more, but ended up giving myself like even more work with having to read, you know, like 200 COVID relief applications a month. So it's just, yeah, it's just layers of stuff.
well, yeah, I mean, that points to like some institutional problems that the fact that you were the only person that could read in Spanish, and in order to
Yeah.
be able to expand it, you need to really consider who else is on the board that can be able to take that on. And yeah, no, that's you've been really really busy. Thank you for taking time to talk with us. Uh,
Yeah, I like whenever anybody from like a different part of the country that's like super far away from the border asks me to do something, usually I say yes, only because I know that, you know, there are a lot of people, you know, like Latinx people all over that, you know, need to see themselves represented in positions of power or, you know, within like any platform that we have. So I think it's always such an honor to get to share my experience, but then also for other people that, you know, aren't familiar with the border or with what, you know, like happens down here. It's always really nice to remind people that, you know, like the border is everywhere. Like the borders are, you know, like gerrymandering, like gentrification. Like there's so many different things that, you know, there are things that affect all of us.
yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to figure out which one to ask you next. We had a question that was actually about your tattoo. And that's on your artist photo. They ask, is there an origin story for the tattoo that's visible from the artist photo? I think that's your inner arm. I think that's the one. But unless there was another one that was visible.
So I have, yeah, there's like a few that are visible. So this one is Baja California. So this is, yeah. So if California was attached to this, then yeah, LA is right here. Tijuana is right here in my armpit. But yeah, so I just like really love Baja, and it's the only place that my family ever like traveled to, just because, you know, like camping is the cheapest thing to do. So yeah, I just really love Baja and being an ambassador for Baja California. I have also this like line that goes
Uh-huh.
across my chest.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that one is, you know, like growing up on the border, you like never really know like what side you belong to, and you never, you know, really feel like the two sides don't a lot of time when you're growing up like feel like they make up a whole. And so I mean, and now I feel like I understand like it's a double, not necessarily like two halves. But when I got it, I was thinking about like being a Gemini, being like Mexican American, being like Mexican and American, and always feeling like I was a half. And so it is like a big staple that like connects the two sides of my body. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. I think that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Early on, we were talking about questions. I didn't know if that would be too personal, but I feel like you shared so much about you and that. So thank you for sharing that. Let's see. There was a question that came up in the Q&A. Have you considered incorporating how the environment, plants, animals, soil, water, ecosystems metabolize the border?
I haven't thought of it as much anymore. Or not, I mean, not anymore. Like, right, like before I hadn't thought of it as much. A few weeks ago, I finished reading this new book that came out that's called Wall Disease. And so it's something that I had learned about when we were traveling through Arizona. about this thing called Mauerkrankheit, which is a disease that was coined after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so it's this thing that happens to people psychologically. It's almost like a weird extension of like PTSD, just like all these different like psychological things that happen to you when you live in proximity to the wall, and all of these different things that happen to people on either side. And like, anyways, it's like the relational, like psychological, like aesthetics of architecture. And so I've been thinking, because I read in that book, there was this one passage of somebody that they had interviewed in Palestine, and they were talking about that, you know, all of the like hate and all of the like negativity that goes into the actual constructing of things while people are working on it. And so now I started thinking a little bit more about like what does that mean, you know, to have all of these materials like imbued with a lot of negative energy. And so I think like once I start kind of developing like that idea and seeing where that takes me, then it'll probably end up to the soil and into the environment. But it was pretty incredible, like seeing how the land is so affected by, you know, the fence and the new construction of the fence where everything was free before, and how, you know, like sadly so many like migratory animals are really affected. Like I didn't know that there was a jaguar in the desert. So there's like a Sonoran desert jaguar that like their migratory path is now cut by the fence that was just put in. But it was cool when we were on the border, there was all these grasshoppers jumping back and forth. And there was like wild watermelon that was growing like through the fence and around the fence. And there was a lot of really like beautiful ways that that nature was still kind of, you know, like subverting. But yeah, no, it's going to be, I think, something that will come into my brain later. But thank you, Guadalupe, for asking that.
That's a great question. So then maybe we can end on, I got some questions about what you're thinking about the future, but you also just opened a show this past Friday. So I don't know if that relates to what you're thinking about for the future, what you're thinking about for your future activism. I love the title of the show that you just opened, Extraño, and the multiple meanings of that word. So I leave it up to you to how you want to finish or, answer those questions.
Okay. So the show just opened, and when we originally thought of the show, you know, it was last year, and we were trying to schedule the show so that it was right before the election, so that we could I could do like a really like hard hitting, like emotional, you know, kind of a little bit more political show about the border, to kind of, you know, like, anyways, to help people figure out who to vote for if they hadn't figured it out yet. But then after, you know, all of this stuff, I had one of my family members passed away, and it was really, really difficult circumstances with COVID. And, you know, just been like such a incredibly like heavy and like heart-wrenching year for all of us, that I was just like, you know what, like I don't want any more, like I don't want to like linger in this heaviness anymore. Like I kind of just want to make pieces that make me happy, like pieces that don't have to have, you know, a bunch of explanations. Like I just want to like linger in joy, and I just want to work with like colors that just, you know, like soothe my soul. And so I think in the end, the pieces still came out a little, like some of them you could still feel like some of the sadness. But I think that just even like me trying to like I said, like linger in like joy, just, gave me like a repose, like it gave me like a little place of rest. to make things that I felt were beautiful. But then in the same time, you know, working on them here while the kids are like doing their homeschool was also a little crazy. So it was also working on pieces that I could handle by myself, pieces that I could ship by myself, pieces that people can hang themselves in their home now that, you know, like we're sadly all isolated this way. So yeah, so then that show is open now, I think, and people can go see it in person because Chicago's still open. They said that they might.
Sorry, I just want to make a plug. Volume Gallery.
Yes, yeah, and then we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, they're able to stay open. I know their cases are rising, so we'll see. But I still have, you know, more projects that I'm working on that are planned to happen at the border. So I am working on. I've been trying to work on opening a ceramic studio at an LGBTQ, what's a trans 12-step program shelter for asylum seekers. And so then that will be something that hopefully like soon I can get going on. So then that's a really big project. And then all of my my collaborators, all of my teammates from Ambos project, we just did a big like Instagram takeover for Design Sponge. And it just made us so happy to like see each other's faces again, even if it was through a screen. And we were so happy to like just be creating more content and working together. So we're also now hoping to do more like projects again. So we'll be able to continue doing more things where we all kind of share the load of stuff too.
That's amazing. That sounds really exciting, and also lingering in the joy, finding things that feel good, that make it make sense a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending time with us this Friday evening, and thank you everyone for joining us. And please check out the websites for Ambos and Volume Gallery, which I posted in here. We can also post a link to A Very Anxious Feeling on view at the Taubman Museum of Art. It's also still on view if you're in Roanoke, Virginia through February, and it's open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to the public. So thank you again, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Gracias.